Hey guys, my hope and prayer is that this message that you're about to watch is a resource that God uses to just bless you and draw you closer in your walk with Him. I also hope that you will use this resource in conjunction with you belonging to a local church and that you won't let it replace your involvement in that church. Again, I really hope that you enjoy this message, and I hope that God uses it to grow you and strengthen you in your love for Jesus Christ.
Well, good morning. Happy Easter. Oh, come on. We can do it. We can do better than that, right? Let's try again. Happy Easter. There we go. He is risen. Hey, come on. You're with it. All right. Hey, we are excited that you're here. And as Michael said, we are kicking off a new series that we're very excited about as we kind of take a look at these images and snapshots that we get at the scene of the resurrection in the days that followed. And today, obviously, being Resurrection Sunday, we're going to take time to look at the tomb, the empty tomb of Jesus as we do that. So today, we're going to be in Mark chapter 16. If you brought a Bible with you, you can turn there. If not, we'll have the verses on the screen that you can follow along as we get into those. All right? Hey, before we do, I want you to think about the last time that you saw a movie that you felt like you fully were involved in it, all right? If you ever go to these movies or maybe rent one and watch on TV or something, and it's like you start watching the movie and you feel like within a few minutes you're in it. It's like, oh, I'm in this story. I feel like I'm a character in the scene. For me, it was when the first time that this really happened was probably my freshman year of high school. I was 14, and I went to the movie with some friends of mine, and we went and saw the movie Remember the Titans. Has anybody ever seen Remember the Titans? Okay, so those of you who have seen it, it's amazing. I would argue it's one of the best movies ever made. You know, that's just me, but it's incredible. Well, I remember watching this movie, and the football element kind of got me there. But then as I'm watching the movie, there's all these elements in it that find me feeling like I'm a part of it. Like I'm feeling the emotions as they're walking through this tension, and they're trying to unify as a team together. I'm watching this, and I'm feeling the struggle. And then the movie keeps going, and they get on the football field, and they start practicing and playing these games and all this stuff, and I feel this moment, and all through it, I feel the highs, and I'm feeling the lows, and I'm feeling every weight of all the things that are happening during this movie. And then we get to the very end, and if you haven't seen it, spoiler alert, they come together, they win the state championship, and as they win, I remember just like, it was just this amazing feeling, and I just, in the theater, it was almost like this collective, like everything happened exactly the way that we wanted it to happen, right? In fact, it was funny, it was a sold-out night that night, and people in the crowd were like in the theater, right? It's a movie, and they're standing up, and they're clapping and cheering, and I'm like, this is awesome. You know, we're at a movie. This isn't a real live event. This is like a replay, and people are cheering and clapping. Why? Because they felt so invested. I think it's like this, right? If I was to go to that movie, let's say I was super late to go to the movie, and I walked in the last 10 to 15 minutes, and all I got to see was that part. Now, I would probably walk out and be like, that was an incredible scene. This movie is awesome. But the way that it's really impactful is when I have seen the entire story leading up to it, and I have felt all the highs and the lows of the struggle. And then the culmination of this beautiful event as they win and we find victory and success, it's like this collective ah and hooray and cheering that ensues because we've been with the entire journey. Today, as we look at Mark 16 is essentially the last 10 to 15 minutes of the gospel story. Right? It's the end of it. Now, it's an amazing story on its own, but where it really becomes impactful is when you know the whole story of what Jesus, his life, his followers, his disciples have been through leading up to this moment. And when you put the whole story of the gospel together and you culminate it with this scene on Resurrection Sunday, what we experience and what we find, it's this collective just moment as we walk into and we experience the beauty of the resurrection of Jesus, of the empty tomb, and all the things that come from it. So what I want to do this morning is I want to walk through the first 8 verses of Mark chapter 16, and as we do that, I want us to think a little bit about what has happened up to this point. Right now, if you think about what has gone on, right, Jesus' disciples, these women that we're about to read about, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and a woman named Salome, these three, along with the 12 men who were the followers, the disciples of Jesus, they have for 3 years sacrificed everything that they knew. Every relationship, every job opportunity, every business adventure. If they were married, they sacrificed time at home. If they were parents, they sacrificed time with their kids, time with their parents, time with their siblings. They sacrificed everything they knew in order to pursue and follow after this man named Jesus from Nazareth, right? The Messiah, the one who had prophesied and said, hey, follow after me, and I will literally change your life. It will be like a new experience. And they gave up everything. Now, following him, right, they come out of situations where they're hopeless, they're living in darkness, they feel spread thin, and they're running away. And what happens is that as they embrace and they get to know Jesus, what we read in the Gospels is that their lives literally, they flip upside down. Like their life, their heart, their minds are transformed because of the encounter that they have with Christ in this moment. And as we get to Friday and we experience what we celebrate or what we mourn on Good Friday, which is the death of Jesus, we enter into Saturday, which would have been an incredibly somber day. The guy that they've given everything to, now he's gone. He's dead, and he's in a tomb. And now we deal with these women, these men, they now deal with these emotions that have come back in. The ones that they had once been freed from are now, they're feeling again. They feel sadness. They feel mourning. They feel the loss of a loved one, of a friend, of one that's close, a brother, all these things. They feel all of that as we get into Saturday. And then we turn to Sunday, which is what we're going to read about this morning. And I just want to say that this is the weight that we feel, all these things that we're experiencing as we walk into Mark chapter 16. All right, so Mark chapter 16, it opens and it reads like this. And when the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome bought spices so that they might come and anoint him, being Jesus. And very early on the first day of the week, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. And they were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us from the entrance of the tomb? And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, although it was extremely large. And entering the tomb, they saw a man sitting at the right, wearing a white robe. They were amazed. But he said to them, do not be amazed. You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who has been crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See, here is the place where they laid him. But go tell his disciples and Peter, he is going before you into Galilee. There you will see him, just as he said to you. And they went out and they fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had gripped them. And they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. What I want to do this morning is I want to pull out of this story a couple of snapshots that we see, some scenes that are happening, and just a couple of the verses and phrases that are read over, and I want to unpack them for us as we essentially paint the picture of what is actually happening as these women approach the tomb and as they embrace the empty tomb for the first time, right? This is a scene that is transformative to human history. It transforms us, what we believe by the gospel. So what separates our faith from every other faith in the world is that we see and we experience that the one that we have committed our life to is not there, right? He has risen. Before we do that, let me just add one little element. You know, the crucifixion, what Jesus went through on Friday, it was created by the Romans as a way of creating not just death, but humiliation death, a death of a public display, set up in front of everyone to see and to witness. In fact, Jesus's was a little bit different because they added the lashings that went before it. So before he approached the cross, in a central court in the middle of town where everybody could see and witness, Jesus was whipped 39 times, right? They said 40 would kill a man. He was one shy of that. 39 lashings he took. Then he had to carry his own cross up to the top of the mountain called Golgotha, where he was there crucified and hung on a tree as a spectacle for everyone to see. It was created by the Romans as a way of saying, hey, the person that you have put hope in is gone forever. He's being publicly humiliated, and all the hopelessness creeps in. Now, on the verge of that, on the heels of that, this is where we find the women. The women have just experienced that on Friday. They walk into the scene. I want to start with the first couple of verses. Here's one of the things that we read. It says this, and when the Sabbath was over, they came to the tomb when the sun had risen. Right now, the women are walking to the tomb. Now, here is essentially what we understand about Friday, the story from Friday up till this point on Sunday morning. The Sabbath was a holy day in this culture. You didn't do anything on the Sabbath. Shops weren't open. There was nothing that you were able to do. Everything essentially shut down. It was a way of honoring the Lord. It was a way of having a day set aside where you spent time with family. You spent time reciting old scriptures, verses, things of this nature. And what happens is that Jesus dies on Friday, roughly around 3 p.m. Now, Jewish calendar, for us, a day starts when we, at 12:01 a.m., right? That's what, it's dark, it's all these times. In the Jewish calendar, the way that a day worked is when dawn hit, right? When sunset came, a new day began. So as soon as the sun sets on a day and darkness hits, a new day began. So let's just hypothetically, we're going to play it out in rough estimated times, right? So 6 p.m., let's just say it gets dark around 6 p.m. Around that time is when the new day would have begun. The Sabbath would have begun. So Friday afternoon would have ended, Friday evening would have come and gone, and a new day would have started Friday 6:30, 7 o'clock p.m., which means that the time from Jesus died until the time the Sabbath began was a very short amount of hours. Now, the interesting part is what the women are doing as they are approaching as they are walking to the tomb is they're going to take care of and properly care for the body of Jesus. It tells us they bought spices. What's that for? They go to essentially wrap the body of Jesus to make sure that it's done appropriately. And the reason why they do that is because they were rushed in getting his body fully prepared before, because the Sabbath was coming, right? So one of the things that we read about actually at the end of chapter 15 is that a man named Joseph, he bought the tomb. He took the body of Jesus. They wrapped a white linen cloth around him, and they put him in the tomb. And they didn't have a chance to properly bury him. So the women are going back. And the reason they're going back on Sunday is because the Sabbath runs from sunset on Friday until sunset on Saturday. Once sunset had hit, the Sabbath ends, but then it's dark and they can't get there. So the belief is that they go early on Sunday morning to the tomb to go and try to prepare and take care of the body of Jesus, right? So it says this, when the Sabbath was over, so this would be early Sunday morning, they come to the tomb when the sun had risen, right? So it's early in the morning, our version of morning, early on Sunday morning, they enter in. And then it goes on to verses 3 and 4, and it says like this. They begin to talk, they have this conversation, and they say, who will roll away the stone for us? Although it was extremely large, right? This word large, it's translated actually in the Greek as megos. You can understand why it's translated that way, right? It's a massive rock. It's a huge stone. And the way the stone was constructed was on the rock wall, there would have been this little groove that would have been in a circular motion that would have fit along the backside of the stone. And what would happen is, as the stone was opened, it would have sat, and then as they rolled the stone would have sat into the grooves that were cut in the rock wall, and it would have been incredibly difficult. It's heavy. Now, moving it into location would have been a little bit easier because you're essentially rolling a stone. You got to get it moving, but it's like with heavy things. But once that thing was set, it was essentially locked into place. Very, very difficult. And what they believe is they ask this question, well, if we're going to take care of the body of Jesus, who is going to move the stone for us? Like, we've got to figure out a way for the stone to be removed if we're going to properly take care of the body of Jesus. Now, one of the questions there is the thought, and I think the idea was that there were tomb raiders, right? There were grave thieves that would go around and they would steal bodies, and there was the belief that the body of Christ was one that was going to be coveted. Everybody was going to want it. They were concerned that maybe there was people already there. There was concerns, so they placed guards there, they put people there, all these kind of thoughts. Why? Because they're concerned about the body of Jesus. So they asked this question thinking, the three of us, we can't go and move the stone. So who is it that's going to come? Who is going to move the stone for us? And as they approach, they see the stone, they ask this question, they look, and they recognize that the stone has now been removed already, right? Which would have probably caused a little bit of, wait, what's happened? Why is the stone moved? What's going on? And so they walk into the tomb, and what it says there is this. They saw a young man sitting at the right. Now, simply put, if you read all four accounts of the gospel, all four gospels have a recounting of the resurrection of Jesus, right? It's in every single one of the Gospels. In Matthew and Luke's Gospel, it talks about this person, this man, being an angel. We believe that this is what it is. It's a man, he's got white robe, he's wearing the clothes, the look, he is the appearance, it's an angel. And what would have happened is, as the women walked into the tomb, the way the tomb would have been set is they would have walked into the tomb. There would have been a little bit of a corridor they would have walked through. And then there would have been a chamber in the back, like a little room, which is where they would have laid the body out in this area. And as they walk through the chamber, it's believed, they walk through the chamber, they walk through the corridor, they turn into the chamber, and there on the right, perched right next to where the body of Jesus would have laid, was this angel. Now, I just want you to imagine, right, the fear that would have crept in. You walk into a tomb that's open, that's not supposed to be open, right? So already you're kind of like, y'all are some brave women, right? Courageous. To the three of you by yourself, not knowing what is in this tomb. You walk into the tomb, you go in there, they turn the corner, they see this vision of this man who is sitting there, an angel, and he begins to speak to them. And here's what I think is interesting and what I really want to spend some time on this morning. What the angel says to them are words that have forever transformed our world. It is the three words that change our faith. It is the words that has changed not just our human history, but the cosmos as a whole. It has changed everything about who we are and how we function as human beings when he looks at them and he says that he has risen. It's the moment that we are here this morning. It is the story of Easter, is that these three words were offered by this angel. And on hearing these three words, everything about these three women's lives and the rest of human history would have been changed forever. Is that they recognized that the one that they had once served, who was dead, is now risen. He is alive. He is breathing. He's not resuscitated. He's resurrected. And this is the hope that we place our life in this morning. This is the truth of it. In fact, what the angel does, I think that's so fascinating, is that the whole dialogue is incredible. In fact, what he says is, it says that they're amazed, right? They see him, they're amazed, and he looks at them and says, don't be amazed. And then he goes on to say it like this. You are looking for, right? You're here. The person you seek is Jesus the Nazarene, who, and then this is what he does. He contrasts the state that Jesus was once in with the state that he is currently in. It's a way of saying, hey, this is what you have once experienced, but now here's what you are experiencing. He says this, you seek Jesus the Nazarene who has been crucified. That is a statement of the past. Now, they walk into the tomb believing that that's a statement of their future, that Jesus has been crucified, but the angel makes it a statement of the past because he goes on to say, this man who was once dead has risen. He is alive, he is moving, he is walking, he is breathing, he is not dead, he is now alive. And this statement alone, it changes everything. Every prophecy that they had once remembered or learned as a little kid about the Messiah who would come, who would die and would be risen again is confirmed in this very moment. As the angel speaks these words to them, everything about their past, everything what they once believed, everything they once knew, everything that they heard Jesus teach about how I will come and I will die and I will be risen again, all of the things that have ever happened in this moment are confirmed as they, with their eyes and with their ears, hear the testimony that's been given. But what I love is this, is that the angel doesn't just stop by telling them, all right, that he is risen. In fact, one of the next statements he says is this. He says, see here where he was laid. He says it like this. He says, hey, see the area where Jesus was. What he goes from is, it'd be like this, right? If I was to go out and let's just say that let's say we were living in Jesus' day. And if I was to come to you as a person and to testify about something that I had seen. Let's say that I was one of the people that walked into the tomb that day. If I walk into or let's say that I was close friends with one of the Marys, right? And Marys go in and they come and they tell me Jesus has risen. And then I go and I tell you and you say, well, how do you know that? And I say, well, my friend who saw it told me, right? There is a little part of you, I think, that's a little bit skeptical, right? And then maybe even like my belief is a little bit skeptical. I'm like, well, hold on. How do I know that they actually saw that? Like, were they dreaming? Were they whatever? But here's what's interesting. What the angel does in this moment is he gives them an opportunity to experience it for themselves, to see it for themselves. Now it's not just something that they've heard. It is something that they've seen. He tells them to look, see where the body of Jesus once was and how it is not here anymore. The body is gone. He's risen and he is not here. And this is a moment where now they have a testimony to be able to say, hey, yet again, we have witnessed with our eyes and seen the things that God has done. He is risen and we have laid our eyes on an empty tomb, on an empty bed, on an empty pedestal. We have seen it with our eyes. It is now not just something that we've heard about from an angel. It is something that we have seen with our eyes this morning. But what I love is that he doesn't stop there, right? He says it like this: you seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. And then he goes on to say like this: he is not here. Now, what I love, and for so long in my life, as I have read through the story of the resurrection, the thing that always pops out to me is the phrase, he is risen. In fact, at our other campus in Sumter, we have this ginormous banner that we hang over the building, and it just says, he is risen. It's on it, right? It is the crux, it's the pinnacle of everything that we believe in our faith. But what I've been so moved by during this Easter season in just reading this story is this phrase, he is not here, right? Like, what's interesting is that Jesus very well could have just been sitting there alive and sitting up, perched up, and, hey, ladies, how you doing? I'm back. I'm here. What are we doing next? Where are we going? And he could have walked out of the tomb with the three ladies, but he doesn't do that. The thought for me, and I think the truth that comes down to it is like this: he is risen and he's on the move. And this is the truth that I think just pierces my heart and my soul this Easter season, is that Jesus is not just that that he's alive. It's not just that he's sitting up in his bed. It's that he's not there anymore. And the reason he's not there is because he's gone to do more things. He is on the move again. And I'll just say it like this: I don't know what Easter is like for you as you have walked into this room today. I don't know what emotions come with you as you carry in weights in different varieties, whether it's relational or financial or sin issues or struggles or whatever it is. But the truth that I can't get over this Easter morning is this, is that he is risen, yes, and we put all of our hope into that, but also he is on the move, and he is on the move not just out moving in the world. He is on the move in my life, and he is on the move in your life. He is on the move this morning, and he is running, seeking to do more ministry, seeking to do more things. In fact, what we read about and what we're going to continue to study in this series is that moving out of this area, Jesus goes to all these places, and he continues to show himself, reveal himself to the people around. Like next week, we're going to look at this. Like he literally comes to the disciples and he reveals himself. He goes to Galilee. He begins to minister there. He does all of these other ministry things. It doesn't stop just by being risen. Jesus is risen and he's on the move. And he is running and he is seeking to do things. Now, he goes on from there and he tells them some instructions, right? He says, hey, he's not here. He's gone. And here's what I want you to do, right? He says it like this. He says, there you will see him, just as he said to you, right? Which points us to this part of the story where the angel tells them, right? He says, go and tell his disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he has told you, right? So here's what he basically says. Hey, go tell everybody, get the disciples, get Peter, grab them, run to Galilee. You're going to go there. Jesus is going to meet you there. Now, what we find is that Jesus actually meets them before that. But that's next week's story. I'm not going to get into that, right? You're going to come back next week. That's a little teaser. It's a really awesome story next week we're going to look at. But get into that, but that's next week. But here's what he does. He says, go to Galilee, right? Galilee is about 90 miles from where they were. Would have probably taken them roughly 4 days to walk there, right? It would have been a very intense journey. Jesus goes, and I just can imagine that the disciples in this moment are so, maybe one of two things. They're either super excited and they're so ready, so they go and they begin to pack up and they begin this journey, or they're so exhausted and they're so in disbelief that they're like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know. I don't know how they respond, but I would imagine that this is ultimately where they are, and then what we find is that Jesus does come and he reveals himself to them a little bit earlier, and it is this incredible moment that, again, we'll take a look at next week, all right? There you will see him. Now, verse 8 ends by saying, they went out and they fled from the tomb, and for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. Now, I think the way they leave is interesting, okay? Now, keep in mind how they come to the tomb. They come to the tomb looking for Jesus, sad, somber, broken, feeling maybe things like despair, feeling hopeless, all of these things. They walk into the tomb with a purpose in mind. We're going to prepare the body of Jesus to be buried appropriately. We have spices, we have these things that we've done to make sure that we can properly take care of and wrap and put away the body of Jesus forever. This is why they're there. But as they walk in, they experience this encounter and they leave knowing that he's risen. And yet the way they leave, it's funny how the description is in Mark. It's not, man, they were jumping, fist pumping, excited, crying, laughing. No, it says that they left, they fled the tomb. fleeing. Like that's like sprinting out of the tomb. Why? Because trembling and astonishment had seized them. Right? They were gripped by this feeling of I'm overwhelmed, almost like this, like, what do we do with this? How do we handle this information that we've been told and these things that we've seen with our eyes? And they said nothing to anybody because they were terrified, right? It's just a very interesting way that they walk out. Now, that's essentially the story of the empty tomb. But here's what's interesting. I think for a lot of us, when we think about Easter and we even walk in this morning, there's so many times in our life that as we just live our life, phrases that come out of our life, and one of the things that we say all the time, I'm guilty of this as well, is I say things like this, right? Like if things are going on in my life, I just kind of say like, well, it is what it is. This is the way life is. And I would imagine that the women and the disciples in this moment, once they had dealt with the fact that Jesus had passed, and people were like, man, I can't believe Jesus died, one of the common phrases would be what? It is what it is. We have to move on. It is what it is. This is my life. This is my story. These are the things. It's over. It is. I feel alone in my life. It is what it is. I feel betrayed by people. It is what it is. I've got financial struggles. I'm nervous. It is what it is. I've got sin struggles. Well, it is what it is. I'm unhealthy in certain areas of my life. What do we say? Well, it is what it is. But I think what the tomb and the empty tomb and the story of the resurrection says is this. Hey, it is not is what it is. That's no longer the phrase anymore. Because what Jesus does is he steps up and he speaks out with a loud megaphone. He says, you know what? You say it is what it is, but I say I am who I am. And who I am is the same God that has been with you all along. And I've spoken a story of life, and I've spoken a story of hope, and I am not done. It is what it is says that the story is over, but I am who I am says that I'm not done working. And I'm still in the process of doing this. In fact, if we reflect on the phrase, I am who I am, way back in the Old Testament when Moses was called to God. And he comes and he says, but God, I don't have the ability. I can't do these things. Like, I'm terrified. I'm nervous. I don't know what to say. I'm ill-equipped. I'm inadequate. It is what it is. He says, what am I supposed to do when I walk into places and I go places and I do these things? What am I supposed to say? And the Lord looks at Moses and speaks to him out of a burning bush. And he says, you know what? You tell them that the I am, who I am, has sent you. And yet again, this is the same proclamation that Jesus is making out of the empty tomb, is we look at our life and say, but God, I don't think I can do this, and I don't know where to go, and it is what it is. And Jesus steps up with a loud megaphone and a mic drop moment, and he says, yeah, you say that, but I say I am who I am. And when I believe that I am who I am is true, then I no longer am it is what it is, but I am he is who he is. And that transforms my life. And that is why the empty tomb, that is how the empty tomb transforms who I am, is that I no longer live in sorrow and in mourning and in all this shame and all these things, because I believe that the I am has spoken and told me who he is. And now it's not about my circumstances making me it's he is who he is. He is who he's always been, right? In the midst of all the things that I struggle with, he is who he is. I thought the story was over. I am who I am. He is who he is. I thought there was no hope, but I am who I am. He is who he is. And so the question becomes then, all right, well, if that's true, then who is he? Who is Jesus? If you're here this morning, you don't have any understanding, any idea, maybe you just walked in here because it's Easter, you felt like you're supposed to go to church, I just want to give you three things that I think the story of the resurrection points to about who God is for us this morning. And it goes like this. There are three things. One is this, is that God is powerful beyond imagination. And this is ever present in this story. I mean, things that we would say are impossible for man to do. Healing, raising someone from the dead, right? Only things that are able and are able to be done by a overpowerful, overwhelming God we see here. He is powerful beyond imagination. In fact, if somebody were to say, how powerful is God? It would go beyond your even ability to dream up a stance on how powerful God is. As far as your imagination can run, God is more powerful than even that. And that power is displayed here. In fact, I would imagine, right, like this is one of the things I think about in the story of the disciples. Like when Jesus dies, it's like, well, let's figure out a way to bring him back. That would have been something. Jesus has given us power to do all these things. Let's see if any of those things work. I would be doing everything, dreaming up every possible way, every imagination. And yet what God does is he says, hey, none of that's possible. You can go as deep as you want your imagination, but my power is beyond that. The second thing is this, is that God is astonishing beyond our comfort. It's like his presence, sometimes it makes us uncomfortable. It makes the women here, they're uncomfortable as they walk in. They're astonished, and it makes them uncomfortable. In fact, so uncomfortable that the thing that they do is they turn and they flee. They hear the greatest news ever, but they're so astonished. They're so taken back by his presence and the understanding of what he's doing and who he is that they flee, and they run out, and they leave, right? He is astonishing beyond our comfort. Lastly, is he is loving beyond our deepest desires. Listen, I'll say it like this. I had the really cool privilege yesterday, sandwiched in between Good Friday and Resurrection Sunday, to perform a wedding in Sumter. And so I got to marry two people, and they came together. And it's just been fun, like talking with them even about that experience, right? Like their desire is what? We love each other. We want to get married. And I would just say it like this. One of the deepest desires that we have in our heart is to feel love. We want to feel loved by people. We want to feel loved by our God. These are all things that we desire to feel. But what we learn here is that God is loving beyond anything that we could actually desire for anyone else. I mean, God loves me beyond my desire for love that I have for my wife, beyond the love that I feel from my wife. Like, it's greater than that. God's love runs deeper than that. As much as I love my children, I've got 3 girls that are beautiful, and I love them, and I would do anything for them. God loves me more. God loves them more. He loves us beyond our deepest desires. In fact, here is one of my favorite, this story has just been such an eye-opener and a heart-opener this year as I've read it. But one of the things that I love that happens is that God very specifically gives a message, and here's the message. Here is what he does. In this moment, right, it says this, go tell his disciples and who? What's it say? Peter. Now, I want you to think about this, right? It's very interesting because when he says go tell the disciples, Peter is a part of that, right? He's a disciple, but Jesus singles Peter out in this moment. And this is the love that Jesus has for us, right? Now think about who Peter is. Peter is the guy who is headstrong. He's a bulldog. He walks on the water to meet Jesus. He's the guy that he stands up when they are together and he proclaims the truth that we believe that you are the God, or you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's what Peter tells Jesus that he is. And Jesus looks at him in that moment and he says, you, Peter, I'll now name you Petros, which means rock, and on you I will build my church. It is a statement that, hey, the days that would come to pass beyond the days of Jesus, when the church begins to be formed, you will be the centerpiece of that. Upon your testimony, upon your preaching, upon your connection to me, on you, I will build the church. It's a massive proclamation. But then what do we learn about Peter? Is that at the Last Supper, Jesus looks at him and he says, hey, 3 times you're going to deny me tonight before the rooster crows. Peter's like, nah, man, Jesus, I love you, man. I'm not doing that. And what goes on to happen? 3 times Jesus denies him. 3 times Peter denies him. 3 times Peter denies him. And if you can imagine what Peter is feeling as Jesus goes to be lifted up on a cross, elevated, he's nailed to a tree, and in this moment, he feels all the weight and the guilt and the shame of what he is living in. And yet in this moment, the God of redemption and of reconciliation, the God who longs to restore us back to himself, says, hey, go get the disciples. And he specifically makes sure that Peter gets an individual invitation. Go tell him and make sure Peter is there, that he goes to Galilee, because I've got something special that I'm about to do. I'm about to come back, and I'm going to reveal myself. And I just want you to imagine that as the women go back and they meet the men, these disciples that are in this room, and Peter is maybe back in the corner, just cannot get over the fact, and they say, well, what happened? Oh my goodness, we saw an angel, and he showed us where Jesus laid. He wasn't there. He told us he's risen, and he told us to go to Galilee. Peter's in the back, and he's listening, and they said, hey, Peter, by the way, he told us to make sure that you were there. This is a God of love, man. This is a God of restoration. And I would just say like this, whatever we feel like we've done to dishonor God, to push us away from God, God on Resurrection Sunday says, hey, but I am risen and I'm on the move and I've come to bring restoration and redemption and reconciliation to all of mankind, all of those who would come to know me. When I was, before I moved to Sumter, I lived in Birmingham, Alabama, and I worked at a church. a Baptist church there called Brookwood Baptist Church, and we had a pastor who was bivocational. He was our head pastor, but he also taught religion in the religion department at Samford University, right? It's in Birmingham. So at Samford, he taught religion there, and one of the things that he did is he had this cohort of students that were Bible students, religion students, and he would meet with them often. And he met this guy who came in his freshman year of college, and he's a new kid, all these experiences, life experiences in front of him. He said he would tell this story on Easter every year about how this one little kid, this freshman, he would walk into his room and he would set meetings with Dr. Barnett, that was his name, the professor. Set meetings with Dr. Barnett to come and just to have conversations with them about life and all the things. So he'd walk in, and Dr. Barnett, the way he recounts the story is he would say, he kind of would walk in dragging his feet, mopey, Dr. Barnett, and he's like, what's wrong? Well, I woke up this morning and I had done all my homework, and then I lost the file. It got deleted off my computer, and I just don't know what to do next. Well, do you think you can still do it? Dr. Barnett would say. And he's like, I guess I can try to do it. He'd walk out, and he'd leave, and then that would be it. The next day, the next week, he'd come back in and set a meeting. Dr. Barnett would say, well, hey, what's going on, man? What's the problem this time? Oh, Dr. Barnett, my girlfriend broke up with me, and I just don't think I can go on. I just don't know what I'm going to do. And it just, I don't, well, hey, there's plenty of fish in the sea, things like this, go on. And he tried to be real positive with them all the time. And eventually, the third or fourth time, this guy comes in, he's mopey, and he's just shoulders down and dragging himself. And he said he got frustrated. Eventually, Dr. Barnett, he's like, I got so tired of always having to be so positive with him. He said, he just looked at him one day after he began to proclaim these things. He looked at him and he said, hey, man, I don't know what else to tell you except this. Tomb's empty. That's it. Tomb's empty. That's all I got for you. I got nothing else to tell you. You come in here moping, I got nothing, just tomb's empty. And it kind of took the student back, and he was kind of like, oh, wow, that was more than I expected to get from you. And so the student walks out, and he said then the rest of, Dr. Barnett tells it, he's like, the rest of the time I would see him on campus, we'd be walking across the quad, and he'd look out at me, and he'd look at me and say, hey, Dr. Barnett, tomb's empty. And there would be this moment that they exchanged across the quad. He'd walk in the cafeteria, and students would be sitting there, and he'd be in this booth eating with his friends, and he'd be talking, and he'd see Dr. Barnett looking in the corner, and he'd say, hey, Dr. Barnett. Dr. Barnett would be startled, look over, tomb's empty. And he would laugh, yeah, tomb's empty. And this was kind of their exchange from here on out, the rest of their time. From that day until the day they graduated, that was their thing. And I don't have much else to say this morning other than this. Hey, I don't know where you find yourself today. I don't know what your experience is, but here's the truth. Here's the reality that we believe in, we hold fast to, is that the tomb is empty. And Jesus is on the move. I don't know what you need to hear. I don't know what brought you here. And I don't know what it is that you came in here expecting to hear. But what I hope you leave hearing is that the tomb is empty. Our faith is restored because our Savior is risen. He is risen, and He is on the move, and He is running, and He is out seeking to meet with you and restore you and redeem you back to Himself. Tomb's empty, and Jesus is on the move. Let's pray this morning. God, we love you so much. And God, we're just so thankful for your presence. We're so thankful for Easter Sunday, for this story of redemption and reconciliation and restoration that we see as these women boldly and courageously, they enter the tomb and they see with their own eyes, God, that you are not there, you're risen. You're not just resuscitated, God, you are resurrected, and now, Lord, you have come into our lives seeking to not just resuscitate us, but to resurrect hearts that are dead, hearts that are darkened, hearts that are in need of you. And Father, our truth, the thing that we rest our feet on this morning is very simply, God, that the tomb is no longer empty and that you, Jesus, are on the move. Before we close, I want to read these lyrics from a song that I listened to this morning. You can stay with your heads bowed, just eyes closed. I just want to read these to us this morning. I was driving here, and as I was driving, a song came on, and I just began to sit in this song. The words go like this. There was a moment when the sky lit up. A flash of light was breaking through. When all was lost across eternity, the King of life was on the move. Jesus, thank you that is you. That when all felt lost, when it was dark, light broke, God, when everything felt like it was gone, the King of life, which is who you are on the move. That's you, Jesus. So we celebrate the empty tomb. We celebrate that you're on the move. We celebrate that you're running to us, that you have come to this place to meet with us. We thank you that this is true of who we are and for the way that it has changed us forever. God, we love you. Lord, as we sing this last song together about the things that you have done, I pray, God, that we would sing out of hearts that recognize and see the empty tomb for what it is, that you are risen, you are alive, you are breathing, you are moving, you are active, and you are on the move this morning, Jesus. We thank you. We pray these things in your name. Amen. Would you